Congratulations, you're writing an offer on an investment property. If it's your first time, or maybe it's been a while, it's useful to just review some of the main points that you're going to need to think about as you go through this process, as well as all the buyer protections that you have in the contract, so you can feel good about going into escrow, hopefully. So beyond obviously the price, there's a few important things to consider when you're putting together your terms. With investment properties, all offers are pretty much written subject to inspection. And what that means is that for the most part, especially with apartment buildings, these buildings are tenant occupied. So you're not going to get a chance to see inside of the units in most cases until you've already got an offer submitted, or sometimes even until you're in escrow, and that's to respect the tenant's privacy. You've got a whole bunch of buyer contingencies that are in place for you to go through the process and make sure you are buying what you thought you were buying, and you get a chance to do all of your due diligence. So besides price, you have to think about a few things. You have to think about your escrow period, which is how long it's going to take you from offer's acceptance to closing escrow and having your deed record. That's the moment where you own the property. You're going to have to think about your earnest money deposit. That is the deposit that you need to wire in typically within 3 business days after acceptance, which is then held by escrow and refundable to you if you need to cancel the deal and exercise any of your contingencies. That earnest money deposit is typically 3% of the purchase price in most cases, but that's totally negotiable, so you can do whatever you want there. So your offer goes over to the seller. Maybe they counter back and forth a few times, maybe not, and they just sign your offer. Once you have an acceptance and the signatures are on the contract, you are officially in escrow or in contract. That's when your timeframes begin, and you have to start doing all of your due diligence, and you have to perform according to the terms of the contract. So the first thing you need to think about is you need to get your earnest money deposit in. That's usually 3% of the purchase price. That's held by escrow, and it's sent over within 3 days after acceptance. If you need to exercise any of your contingencies and back out of the deal, it's typically refunded to you. So there's really not a whole lot of risk, at least at the beginning of the escrow. Second thing you need to consider are all of your contract contingencies. So you may have heard that word before and you're not quite sure what it is. Contingencies are basically buyer protection clauses. In some cases, seller protection clauses as well, that allow you to cancel the deal if you discover information in due diligence that makes it less attractive, or if you just find that the deal doesn't work for you, or a variety of different reasons. Your main contingency is called the investigation contingency or the inspection contingency, also just known as your due diligence period. And in our local area, the industry standard for that is 17 days, or at least that's the default language on our contract. And so during that first 17 days, you would complete all of your inspections on the property, you would go through all the units, get to see the condition, you can bring contractors out to the building, have them assess the condition of things like the roof and the plumbing and the electrical. During that time, you would review all of the books and records related to the property. That would include profit and loss statements, rent roll, leases, title reports, all that sort of stuff to verify what you're buying. And typically during that time period, you can cancel the deal for any reason or no reason at all. You just sign your cancellation, that goes over to escrow, your deposit gets refunded to you, and you move on and go look for your next deal. So there's really no risk at all during that period. Once you've done all your investigations and you are satisfied with the property, you've done your due diligence, so to speak, you would waive that contingency by signing a contingency removal form, and then you would not be able to cancel for those reasons afterwards. It's important to note that that contingency typically does not automatically waive itself after the time period has elapsed. And the buyer usually needs to sign something agreeing that they release that contingency. So if it's taking you a little bit longer to get through your investigations, that's okay in some cases. You can ask for extensions as necessary, and you're not just going to lose that deposit. Your second main contingency that you have to consider is the appraisal contingency. And the appraisal contingency is pretty simple. It just basically says that the contract is contingent on the property appraising for the contract price by an independent third-party appraiser that's typically hired by the bank, but you pay them to do the appraisal. So they're going to go out usually within also the first 17 days. They're going to complete an appraisal on the property. They're either going to use the income approach for 5-unit and up buildings or the sales comparison approach for 1 to 4 unit properties. And they're going to look at all the comparable sales. They're going to deliver a report that gives their appraisal of the value of the property as of the time of the contract. So if that comes back at your contract price, you're good. You can go ahead and waive the appraisal contingency. If it comes in low, you really have a few different options. You can cancel the deal because it came in low and you don't want to buy a property where it appraised low. You can attempt to renegotiate the price and ask for a price reduction. Or you can just accept the low appraisal and move forward anyway. Depending on your loan program, that may or may not require some extra money down out of pocket. Your third contingency is the loan contingency, also known as the financing contingency. And that basically says that getting approved for the loan that you've described in the contract is a contingency of the sale. And so that means that if for whatever reason your loan gets declined and you still have that contingency in place, you can back out, cancel the deal, and again, you get your deposit refunded after that happens. Loan contingencies, to have the right amount of time, probably takes 45 days for a commercial purchase, maybe 35 days if you're moving quickly. On a residential transaction, that's going to be more like 17 days. In practice, though, it's pretty common in the industry to shorten those time periods or even counter them out entirely, because often way before you get to final loan approval, you're going to have a pretty good idea from your lender as to whether you're going to get approved for that financing. So those are the three main contingencies that are the most important as you consider the terms in writing your offer and as you contemplate going into escrow. That's where most buyer anxieties come from, is not understanding all the terms of the contract and the protections that you have so that you make sure you're going to be able to close when you decide that you want to and you know you're able to perform and close escrow on the deal. Some other things to consider when you submit your offer is you want to make the best witness for yourself as possible to the seller. We're in a really competitive market right now, and properties often receive multiple offers. So putting your best foot forward often includes things like sweetening the terms in the offer, including proof of funds, which are just bank statements, brokerage statements, or anything else that can show the liquidity that you have to close the deal. That would be for the down payment or for the cash purchase price if you're buying all cash. If it's a 1 to 4 unit purchase, it's pretty typical to include a pre-approval letter. If it's a 5-unit and up purchase, that's less common, but you might be able to get a letter of interest from a bank even before you write the offer, although that's done more often than not in the first week after you're in contract. And then it can be helpful to include a schedule of real estate owned if you're an experienced investor or whoever else might be on your team helping you out, how well you know the local area, the due diligence that you've already done on the deal, just on the computer and what you've looked at, all that kind of stuff. That can really help your chances. Hopefully that demystifies the process of writing and submitting an offer on an investment property. Of course, the contract itself is 20-some pages, so I recommend you read all of the terms in there and understand them. If you have questions, of course, reach out to your investment consultant so you really understand what it is that you're signing and what you're obligating yourself to. See you again next time.